Dear guests, first of all, thank you all for coming and joining us at the Vote at 16 seminar. If you should have any questions throughout the day, feel free to contact the organizers. You can recognize us by this Vote at 16 pin, or just look up for Estonian National Youth Council members. There aren't so many of us, 2 or 3 people. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the President of Riigikogu for the opening keynote speech, Mr. Eiki Nestor.
Good morning, dear friends. To be critical about the gray-haired group of politicians, I would say that when the world turned very quickly to be more open, the politicians in the developed democracies, they are sitting somewhere in the parliament committees talking about the tax reform. And somehow they don't understand that the way how we must do politics nowadays is totally different from the previous. That's why, by the way, in a lot of countries in Europe, we can see now that the populist parties somehow are winning, and they win based on that the expectations of the voters are totally different from the previous time. So it means that it seems to me that after the May will be June, we don't fight against it, and in the same way it's not possible to fight against the new open globalized world. And the new open globalized world mean also tolerance, mean also understanding, and to do politics nowadays is not just to think about your family, your village or city or country. It's also in Europe. We must think about Europe and the world as a place where we are living. In a lot of cases, the first and very populistic way, by the way, is to propose that it's easy and now we must take some responsibilities from the representative democracy and give it to the direct one. But as we see, it's also somehow problematic, by the way, as we see in Great Britain, in the Brexit case, when the people in the next day after the referendum want to change their votes what they give a day before. So it means that in a lot of cases, this open world is different. And it means also that the democracy nowadays must be more open. And the key word on my mind is that the representative democracy will grow with the direct participation of the people in politics if they want. So it means that such kind of Chatham House rules in the parliaments work with the closed doors, what was even easier for the politicians. These days are over. Of course, if you have a debate between different political understandings and then you find a solution, it's easier to save your face. But nowadays we see that the voters know the understanding of the politicians even before they are going to the Parliament House, to the committee and shut the door, because the people want to participate in politics actually every day, not just once when it's a parliament election time. And one part of it is also that the young people want to participate. So it's easy to understand. I think there are different ways to behave. For example, it's also has been a big fight in the Estonian parliament to be more open and understandable for the public, but also we give in a lot of years the opportunities to our youth organizations to be represented, and actually, as I know, they are every week guests in different organizations in our committee dealing with education and culture. So this is my short opening remarks, and I would like to say some word about the rock stars, finally. You know, the rock stars, most of them, they're always drunk or a little bit high, and they used to say that the politics is some kind of bad thing. Of course, there are different musicians, I would say most well known as Bono or Sting. My favorite musician, Frank Zappa, even in the 70s, when I get his records, I don't understand that in all the records that are written, don't forget, register yourself. I was surprised because I don't know that in the United States, to go to vote, you must register yourself before. He promoted to be politically active even 50 years ago. And let me finalize with his words. Your mind is like a parachute. It works better if you open it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heikki Nestor. Before we move on with the first session, I feel like I should run you through the whole day, what is coming up, and some information that you may need to know. First of all, we're going to have 3 different sessions today. Each session is going to talk about more or less about the same topic, but from a different point of view. The first session that we're going to have in about 10 minutes is about the potential impact of lowering the voting age, and it's on the Estonian point of view. We're going to have experts on the Estonian level discussing about the opportunities and possibilities after lowering the voting age on the local level. After what, we're going to have a little coffee break. Each coffee break is going to be in the next room, which you came in from. The second session is going to have a much broader view, an European view about how can we cooperate to advance lowering the voting age to 16. After what, we're going to have a lunch break. And in order to go to the lunch break, it's going to happen in a different room, a little bit away from here. We're going to gather in the same room. We're going to have the coffee break right next to here, and we're going to go there all together in order not anyone to get lost on the way. And the third session is going to talk about democracy sustainability and how can we cooperate to advance intergenerational justice and democracy education in Europe. So 3 different sides of one big topic. I hope you all will get some new ideas throughout the day, and you can express your own ideas the same way. So without further notice, Christina is going to tell you some facts.
Yes, hello, also from the Children's Voice Association. It's very nice that you came all here today. I would like to give just a few historical perspectives on where we are today. Estonia and Finland celebrate 100-year anniversaries. There is a lot of talk in the world about the importance of sustainability, of taking responsibility for our lives, for the planet, for different topics. So a lot of discussion today is also about our responsibility for the younger generations, for the countries we live in, and what kind of actions we can take to ensure that. So if we take the first perspective, it's the perspective of democratic inclusion. When democracy was born in Greece, only about 13% of citizens were eligible to vote, and they called it democracy. Then in the 18th century Europe, for example, in England, only 3% were eligible to vote, and they also called it a democracy. When, in example of Finland, in 1906, women got the right to vote, and the voting age was 24, only about half of the population was eligible to vote. And of course, it was called a democracy. Today, in the world, there is about 30% of under 18-year-olds in democratic countries. And we all call it democracy. We think that we live in democracy, even though we have about 30% of people who are not represented in decision-making, and their interests are not represented like in a proper way. So our vision of Children's Voice Association, at least, is that someday we have 100% representation. How we achieve that, we will see. It might be a long process, maybe as many centuries as we have back in this picture, maybe many centuries going forward, but someday, hopefully, at least some improvement will take place. So if we lower the voting age to 16, at least in Finland, it will mean 3% addition to the voting representation. If we take just an example of what aging society means, the average voting age in many countries in Europe is growing. So this is just an example of Finland, but it's very representative for almost any country in Europe. So the voting activity of the older population is very strongly higher than the voting activity of the younger people. And if we go to 18, 23-year-olds, it's as low as less than 20%. So today we hope to find questions and answers how to increase the activity of the younger people, how to improve the society's understanding of their needs, and what kind of actions we can take. One more historical perspective on the children's rights, children's voice to be heard. In 1873, in France, there was a historian who suggested that children and women should be given the voting right. And then actually in 1923, the French Parliament, and this is the only historical event where the Parliament would vote in favor of children's and women's voting right. So in France, they actually accepted it, that women and children should have the right to vote, but they changed the government and something else changes happened, so that it never was written into law, but they at least voted for it. If we look today, we have in quite many countries already voting at 16, also outside Europe, and in a few countries inside Europe. So we hope this discussion will spread internationally going forward. One more historical perspective. So democracy usually has costs. It doesn't come just easily. So throughout history, there have been big events which have actually impacted on advancing democracy. If we look at the aftermath of World War I, it gave some discussion, some movement in Europe, which advanced the democratic principles. Decolonization was a big trend also, it advanced democracy. Then there was the fall of communism, which also increased the number of countries which became democratic. Then quite a long process, and it took in different countries different periods, the voting rights to women throughout Europe. It started the beginning of 20th century, ended in Switzerland in 91. So almost 100 years it took to give women voting rights. And now we have, I believe, one more trend coming, which is very consciously taking consideration of the youth interests and youth participation and sustainability more broadly. So with these words, I would like to welcome you to the discussion today, and we will start with the first panel. All the panelists are very welcome to come to take your seats. And this panel will be moderated by Niklas Wilhelmsson from the Ministry of Justice in Finland. Niklas, welcome. The floor is yours.
Could we have the panelists as well up here? Well, good morning to everyone. And I'm very pleased and honored to be invited to this session and for being asked to chairing this session. My name is Niklas Wilhelmsson. I come from the Ministry of Justice in Finland. I work there as a ministerial advisor, and I'm coordinating a unit, the democracy unit at our ministry. And our unit deals with everything that has to do with democracy, both with elections, voting, and other forms of democratic or democracy, things related to democracy. And I will talk in the second panel about what we've been doing in this field, the voting age 16 in Finland, but this session will deal with the lowering of the voting age in Estonia, and we will deal with some background, first of all, how we have come here, and then also a little bit talk about the effects and possible outcomes of this, and also we will tackle the issue of future development. So we have 1.5 hours to do this, and first we have presentation of approximately 10 minutes from our panelists, and after that I will open the floor and we will have some questions and hopefully also some debate around this issue. But I would like, first we have Professor Anu Toots from the University of Tallinn. She will talk about the expected outcomes of the lowering of the voting age from a more research or academic point of view. Then we have Lauri Luik, who is a member of the Riigikogu and chairman of the Youth Support Group, and his presentations will deal with the votes at 16 from more or less the political perspective. The third presentation will be given by Roger Tibar. Excuse me if I don't pronounce your names correctly, but he's the chairman of the Estonian National Youth Council, and his presentation deals with the question, what would be the possible outcome for local level youth participation? And last but not least, we have Rein Olesk, government and politics student from the University of Tartu, and he talks about what the youth themselves think about this issue. And this is also a very important issue that we have been discussing in Finland as well. But without a longer presentation now in the beginning, I think I'll open the floor and give the first words to Anu Toots, and then if we have the presentation and if you have questions, we take the questions after the presentation, so please write them down. Thank you very much. Anu, please.
Okay. I hope it works. So welcome to everyone. I am happy to talk again, I should say, about the Vote at 16 initiative. Firstly, maybe a couple of words how I get involved into this business. And this is mainly to my students who were very active in Estonian National Youth Council. And actually, thanks to their initiative and activities, the things get done at all in Estonia. Because without youth enthusiasm in pushing the issue and perceiving the old MPs that this is a good thing to carry out, I really doubt that Estonia would have now the voting age at 16. And besides of that, I have been involved in international IEA citizenship study for several years, since 1999 already. So we had a truly rich database to find out what young people in 14, 15 years of age think about democracy and how they see their own role as citizenship. And maybe my involvement in this IEA citizenship study gave to the Ministry of Justice the argument to commit an ex-ante policy assessment study what based on the scientific knowledge could be positive and negative effects of the lowering the voting age. And this study was made before the voting at the Riigikogu, and I hope that the positive, or let's say supportive conclusions of this ex-ante policy study were also helping to come to the positive conclusion at the voting at Riigikogu. So, although I was introduced as presenting some scientific results, I am not going to show you any sophisticated data analysis at this point. I just thought I will focus on three issues. First, I will comment on some direct effects of the lowering the voting age. Then I will pick up some broader effects. And thirdly, I would raise maybe some challenges and future perspectives. What is the next step where Estonia should move, and other countries probably also. So, as you probably know, we had the last local elections last fall in 2017, and this was the first real practical possibility for young voters to give the votes. And the results, according to the survey which was committed by the Estonian National Youth Council, actually young people, or young voters to be more precise, made the first test very well, because one of the main claims, not just among Estonian politicians and researchers, but also more widely internationally, is that young people are not voting. They don't like voting, they don't care about elections, etc., etc. And if we compare turnout data in Estonia 2017, then we see that the first time young voters, 16 and 17-year-old people, voted, their turnout was 59%, whereas the national average was just 53%. So I think this was the first real surprise of this political change. Young people in Estonia really do care about voting, and this is not just on the level of attitudes, which are very positive towards voting. Like, if I remember correctly, about 85% of 14, 15-year-olds think that a good citizen should vote at local and national elections. So this is the first point. They really went to vote. But the second aspect of voting turnout is, as you can assume, about e-voting, because Estonia is very proud about e-voting. And only very recently we have a public discussion whether this is really a secure way to carry out elections. So research community stands divided on the matter whether young generation is really a e-citizen generation. Because several surveys in Estonia also show that although our young people are very heavy web users and all those smart device users, they are not using e-government or e-democracy. And this was again proved during the last local elections, because only 7% of 16-17-year-olds voted via internet, whereas the national average is 17%. So here we see that the internet voting was very, very marginal among those first-time voters. And one of my colleagues explained that maybe this is the first-time effect, so to say. So that the first-time voters wanted to see how it really looks like, to go to the polling station, to find your name on the paper, to sign it on the paper, to get the voting bulletin, to tick the box, and that's it. So we shall see what will be the next time, whether we have a larger portion of young voters going for internet voting. The next point, which is also discussed a lot among political scientists, is about quality of voting or quality of democracy more broadly. And the argument is that people can vote, but if they don't understand which party really stands for their interest, that's actually nonsense, because you get the government what you actually didn't want. And how to measure in political science there is a solid package of knowledge how to measure the quality of votes. What I could look just for this presentation is to look at young people's responses, what motives did guide your choice of the candidate. And again, the results are really positive, because 25% say that the candidate's background was important, and other 25% say the candidate's party affiliation was important. So this really shows that they are mature voters. They do understand what is actually matters to make the choice of the representative. And only 1% say that they voted randomly, or they voted as their friends told them. So I don't see any reason to doubt that the quality of democracy is in risk because we lowered the voting age. So now about the broader effects. When I was presenting the ex-ante policy study and speaking in the same building for politicians before they went to voting, why we should actually do it. And there was quite a lot of skepticism among MPs. I had the feeling, and I think I still have the feeling, that the support to lowering of voting age is not even across political parties' lines. There are some political parties who are more skeptical, saying that let's not take childhood away from our children. And there are other parties who are more supportive. And this is, of course, related to the typical constituency of political parties. And what is interesting for Estonia, because we are quite young democracy, still 25 years, so the traditional class-based voting is very weak in Estonia. Instead of that, ethnical voting is important, and also age-based voting is important. We have clearly political parties who are more liked among young people, and we have clearly political parties that are more liked among elder people. And this is not simply like left-right division. So the argument why we should decrease the voting age for me is that we need to build a more inclusive society. We have to share the rights to vote and also the responsibilities of government. Because if you don't vote, you are not also responsible for what is going on in the politics. For local elections, this is somewhat more tricky business to firstly to study what is the broader effect of lowering the voting age, because we have quite important regional disparities. And this is about turnout also. Typically, northeast part of Estonia, which is closer to the Russian border, the Narva is the center of this region, and always the turnout rate has been lower in this region, which shows also that Russian-speaking minority still doesn't, some of them do not have rights to vote at national elections, for example. But for local elections, basically everyone of permanent residents can vote without regarding what citizenship she or he has. But still the turnout rate is much lower among Russian speakers. So one of the effects that I don't know yet is what was the turnout for Russian-speaking young people. The international study, which studied the attitudes, showed that Russian-speaking youth is even more active or more ready to get involved in politics. For example, to become a member of political party, to stand as a candidate, the attitudes of Russian-speaking youth is much stronger, whereas Estonian-speaking youth. But how they acted in reality during the last local elections, I don't know yet, because I don't have data and I couldn't make any analysis based on this. Another challenge maybe in studying the lowering of voting age is related to the schools as institutions, because the general assumption in democratic elections or free election is that the voters are autonomous. They are free to make their choices. And that's the problem why several democracies still struggle whether to give voting rights for prisoners or for people who are in social care institutions, because they are not free persons in every sense. And if you think on a student who is 16-year-old or 17-year-old, still in the school, and some of them are still in compulsory schooling, so they are much more influenced by the school environment. What is the general ethos in that particular school towards the elections and political participation? What are the attitudes of the close teachers who are teaching social sciences or who classroom teachers? Or what is the attitude of headmaster? And this is actually, from a researcher's point of view, a very, very interesting area, which is almost non-explored yet. And we have made some preliminary analysis and some draft conference paper is still waiting on my table to get published. But this is something what we need to take into account. What was positive in the experience of Estonia was that this factor of institutional embeddedness was understood before the election rally came. So on I'm sorry, I can't probably say the proper word of the document. Let's call it convention or charter between different political parties, like educational people or people in the schools. Ministry of Education was the party. Then the Chancellor of Justice, who is also ombudsman, children ombudsman in Estonia, and political parties, I guess, was the third party. They made an agreement how to carry, what is allowed and what is not allowed during the election campaign in schools, because very various situations can occur. And also the Estonian National Youth Council organized, a project or movement of election watches who monitored whether everything is made according to the standard of free elections. So actually Estonia in advance already took some risks away. And yeah, and I think this is maybe...
Okay.
I spent my time,
Yes,
I guess.
Thank you, Anu, for very valuable comments. If I reflect on it a bit before the next presentation, I would say that it seems really encouraging that the turnout rate among young people here in Estonia was fairly high, even above the average turnout rate. And it also seems very interesting that that it seems that young people also tend to vote for younger persons, so that we maybe can have more young people also involved in decision-making bodies. What we in Finland, I will get back to this perhaps more in detail in my presentation, but when we were thinking about lowering the voting age, the problem was how to evaluate it. And you told something about it. We thought it was it's just sort of a dilemma if we think of turnout and who do you vote for, and what would the factors be? Because otherwise, if we see elderly people not voting, we should perhaps take away their voting rights, or you cannot say that you voted for the wrong party, so we take away your voting rights. We think that it's more a question about fundamental rights, that if you once give them, it's very hard to cancel them. Or we didn't figure out any way of any good measures of why that would be. And the other very interesting thing is about schools. And I think that you covered it quite well. First of all, the influence of schools on children, but secondly, I think one important point which we now, even though we don't have, still can vote at 16. One important thing is civic education and human rights education, which we have introduced in our curricula, now in our new curricula, and I think that these somehow go hands in hand with voting rights and so forth. I understand that schools should not be influencing how the young people vote, but they should anyway have a possibility to be educated about our democratic system. So this is a very interesting balance, I think. So very, very interesting points. Then a practical question, if you happen to have, I don't know if you have PowerPoint presentations, any one of you? Okay, then you can come here, or then I can change the slides, depends on how you want. But let's go over to Lauri and speak a little about the impact of Vote 16 from the political side perspective, and how perhaps the discussions that was behind this decision. So, yes, of course.
So good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today because I feel a deep connection with this topic. I'm not going to give you a formal speech today because I see from your agenda that you have plenty of those in the list already. So I'm going to just share you my story, which actually proves why I'm so confident that this decision we made years ago to give a chance for a younger generation to vote in the local elections was a great thing to do and the right thing to do. So it all started when I was 16 years old, and I wanted to make a change. I now live in a small town called Haapsalu. I was born there, and it's 100 kilometers from here, 10,000 people living there only. And at that time, when I was 16 years old, it was a very, very quiet town, small town. For younger generation, not many things to do, mostly for older people. But we wanted to make a change. We wanted to make Haapsalu alive, to make it more active. So the first thing I did, actually, was taking responsibility by myself. It wasn't given for us. The opportunity wasn't given for us at that time. We had to take it by ourselves. So the first thing I wanted to have was having fun, of course, if I was 16 years old. So me and my friend, we decided that we become DJs in my school. So we started playing music and entertain our fellow students in my school. So we had lots of fun. And it actually led us to the next step. My fellow students and friends told me, Lauri, you are now famous in the school, you're active in the school. You should be a candidate for a student council board as a chairman. And it was called the Monarch at that time. So I decided why not? And I ran for the chairman. And thanks to the help of my friends and fellow students, I got elected. And I was proud to stand for our rights for 2 consecutive terms in my high school. And I learned a lot during this time. I learned what democracy is all about, what is leadership all about, what is to lead people, to connect people, how to speak, how to debate, and so on. And it all took me to the next step. We already made school life more active. We wanted to do life in our town more active. So we formed a youth club, Estonian Reform Party Youth Club in Haapsalu. And the first thing we did was putting together a team. And during those years, we gathered actually 350 young people together. Can you imagine? It's quite a huge amount of young people in such a small town. And even though our mother party, Estonian Reform Party, was in the opposition at that time, the coalition always asked us, what is our opinion, what we would like to have in Haapsalu, what kind of events there should be, what kind of activities there should be, what kind of actions should be taken, and so on. So the first big thing we started to do was building a skate park for our younger generation, because we knew quite well what we want. We knew what kind of town we want. We knew what kind of activities we want. So we started doing, building playing grounds for children. We started doing charity things and organizing seminars and parties and so on. So it was a very active time, and today Haapsalu is called the youth-friendly city. So I don't know if it's because of that, but I definitely am sure that we put our effort into that. So. And the next step for me was running for the president of Estonian Reform Party Youth. It means the whole state level. And we started to develop youth clubs over Estonia. We started to organize different kind of events, giving seminars, educating our children and youth. So it gave me huge experience. And the next logical step for me was running for a member of city council. Lots of my friends and colleagues from youth club encouraged me to become a candidate, and we had already done lots of things outside, but now we decided, okay, it's time to go and try to reform things from inside. It's one of the best ways is to be a candidate by yourself. So I was running a candidate and I got elected because of my friends and the team. Unfortunately, at that time, many of my team members were not allowed to vote because they were not 18 years old yet. But still, I was fortunate enough to get elected. And we started to reform things on the city level, from the council. Years go by, and university came, and then working years came, until 2007, when some of my friends told me, Lauri, now it's time to run for parliament. I was thinking, are you crazy? Because I wasn't confident about that. I was too young. I was only 24 years old at that time. And lots of other people, opponents, told Lauri, who are you? Nobody knows you. You haven't done anything yet. You are too young, and so on and so on. And then I decided, okay, I will do that. I will prove it to myself. And because of my team and fellow club members, we formed quite an active team, campaigning team, and we did a lot of work. And I was fortunate enough to get elected into parliament in 2007, when I was 24. So since then, I've been in parliament, and the first 8 years, I've been working in the Committee of Culture Affairs, which means we focused on the topics like education, culture, sports, integration, and youth questions. And one of the main questions, talking about youth, was giving more rights for our younger generation to vote and to be more active in the society. So on different kind of debates, we had a lot of debates going on at that time on this topic. I was living proof, and I was living example. I didn't have to find any more additional proofs for that. to explain or to argue, because I was just giving my story. I was a living example, and of course there were lots of opponents who told that, Lauri, we won't trust younger people. They are like, it's too easy to influence or to affect them, and then politics goes to schools and so on. But actually there were not any real arguments against that for me, because I told them that we already have 18 and 19-year-olds who can vote, and they still go to schools. What's the problem? It's a question of school rules. There's no problem with that. And talking about affecting or influencing people, Professor Anu Toots just told you about the results of the survey. Only 1% actually listened the recommendations. Other people just decided by themselves. And as I mentioned, we knew quite well what we want from our hometown. When I was 16, I really know what I wanted. I wanted to have fun, I wanted to have more active life, to have a skate park, to do charity things, to organize seminars, to educate myself, and so on. So I think nowadays 16-year-old people are even smarter and even more clever. So I had no doubt about that. So it was very, very easy for me to protect this idea. Of course, we got some confidence from other pioneer countries who had done it already. For example, Germany and Switzerland and Norway, etc., who were already mentioned here. So it wasn't so tough decision for us to make, and I was pretty confident about that. So unfortunately, so far, younger generation has been quite passive on elections. But as the past survey showed, now the activity went up. So I think it's a matter of time to just to form a tradition among younger people to go voting and to be a part of society and so on. And to make it work even more brilliantly, I think it's very important to integrate it tightly with our curriculums, as we already done actually. But I see that it can be done even more better. We have to explain and teach to our youngsters that what democracy is all about. What is it to take responsibility? What is real power, and what you can really change or what you can't. The one thing to do is to do it by yourself, as we did, to take responsibility. Now we give this opportunity to the younger generation to vote. We didn't have it at our time. So we should explain how important it is actually to take this responsibility and to vote and to be active. Unfortunately, I read from the summary that about 25% of youngsters told that they are not interested in politics. But we have to explain in schools also that life is politics, take it or not. But I wouldn't even call it politics, it's real life. Because we wanted to have a skate park, we wanted to have fun, we wanted to have seminars and stuff like that. So I wouldn't call it politics, I would call it life. So we should explain it also like that to our youngsters in schools. So if you put those two things together, this practical thing, voting, and these teachings, I think it's going to work out brilliantly. So perhaps it's a little bit too early to draw final conclusions yet. I think we should give some time for that, to settle it a little bit. And as Professor Toots mentioned, that it was very surprising for me too that the e-elections were very passive among the younger generation. I think the argument was actually right, that they wanted to feel it by themselves. And actually, to be honest, the first times I always went on Sundays with my family to vote. First, I don't know, 7 or 8 times if I went voting. Now I do it electronically, but I just wanted to catch the feeling. So I think it's a matter of time, it will work out. And the next logical step, in my opinion, is parliamentary elections. Course, and still I can be a living proof, and I can argue for that. So thank you very much once more for inviting me here. I'm super excited and thankful for you for giving a speech today here and discuss it with you. I wish you good luck and power to fight further, because I can honestly say that this decision we made together actually was because of you, because of the cooperation between Estonian youth organizations and our politicians. And you stepped up and you showed activity, and that's the way it should be. And that's how we make impact in the society. So thank you very much, and good luck. Thanks.
Thank you very much for a very interesting speech. One thing that I would say from this is that voting rights are, of course, very important and essential, and it's a very interesting case here in Estonia as well. But like Lauri Luik explained, he went into politics as a youngster and was very passionate about it, and also the role of the schools. But I would say one other important thing is not only to look at voting rights. We need to expand and look at what other participatory rights young people have, and that's something we've been doing in Finland lately quite a lot. I mean, for example, youth councils are now mandatory at the local level, and how youth has to be consulted in certain issues, for example, concerning culture and youth policy. We also have municipal initiatives which are open for anyone, also young people, to take part in, so that you, in a way, learn how to participate and engage. And I also think that it's important that you learn it at school, and that's why, for example, school councils are now mandatory by law, that you need to have them. So we need to even though our focus today is voting at 16, voting rights, but I think we need to expand the scope and also look broader at the other participatory right and how we can enhance the possibilities of young people. But with saying this, we go to the next presentation. We have Roger Tibar and talking about the outcomes of youth participation at the local level. Would you like to come here, or yes, please?
So, hello again. I've been active on the local, regional, and now national level for about the past 6 years, and I would like to call it a disease of activism that is ever growing each time you get a positive participation experience, and I really enjoy it. And as Lauri, I'm not going to give somewhat of a formal speech. I wrote down some keynotes and some strategical points that I thought that I need to give to you. But the first thing when I started to think about the positive effects of which the changing of the constitution regarding voting rights could bring, then I remembered an article that I wrote about 4 years ago in 2014 on one of the Estonian national media outlets. Since I'm from a rather small city in Estonia, to be from the same city that is Lauri, to be concrete, I knew back then, as the chairman of the local youth council at that time, that the mindset of the youngsters in my home city were pretty divided. We didn't have somewhat of an anonymous or unity of our mindsets and our thoughts that everybody wanted for the lowering of the voting age to happen. But me, myself, I knew that it's a thing that we must have in the near future, and not only at the local level, but in the future on every level possible. And back then, voters who weren't ready and people thought they were easily manipulated, those facts were thrown back and forth from the people that were not so positive about the potential change of the voting age. It was from that day and until now that I know that changing of the constitution isn't the biggest or the only goal that we can achieve. It's just a part of a bigger process, and I hope that we all agree on that. And I'm not talking about lowering the voting age in other elections. Definitely that also, as of Lauri said, maybe in some years we're going to talk about lowering the voting age on the national, on the Riigikogu elections. But I'm talking about the need to take further steps that boost the positive effects of changing the constitution. And the main field to go in detail that we need to look over is the civic education part that we give in Estonia. I remember a line that Professor Anu Toots told back in 2014, quote, "There aren't negative effects when it comes to lowering the voting age, but the positive effects depend on the accompanying changes that come with it." And it's a golden sentence, I think, because as I said, it's not the only goal to change the voting age, but we need to adapt different processes with it. So given the fact that the research conducted by a research agency, Kantar Emor, that already Professor Anu Toots mentioned, showed that the estimated turnout of our first local elections where 16 and 17-year-olds could vote was 59%. And every fourth respondent who did not vote pointed out that they are not interested in politics. From these facts, we can see that we still have room for improvement, and it needs to be done in cooperation with politicians, schools, young people themselves, youth organizations, and etc. Since Estonia was growing and somewhat is still going through an administrative reform regarding the local municipalities, there were a lot of loose ends from the local municipality point of view on how to involve more young people in the decision-making process. And it still is somewhat of a big topic every now and then and on different municipalities. By now, the local municipalities are almost getting a hang of the new system, where you have to manage a larger area, more residents, more topics on which you have to provide, since the new system promised that municipalities will be stronger and have more resources to raise the quality of services. Unfortunately, youth work and youth participation is often one of the last things that a mayor or city council thinks of. And I know this in fact because I've been on the field for so many years, and I am still on the field. Every day I speak with the local municipalities and the city council members. So to conclude my part and to really answer the question that was raised, what would the possible positive outcome for local level youth participation be? If we want that youth participation on the local level would improve, and we could see a rise of civic engagement overall, we have to think, especially from the political side, that we cannot afford to give attention to young people only briefly before each elections, but further steps need to be taken to engage youth even more to the democratic processes between election periods. We need to send a bigger message by the state, which encourages decision makers to more actively engage young people. Make the first steps, and not only to develop the local youth council network and the youth organization network in Estonia, but to develop new participation methods to involve more people to the process and let them see the positive outcome of being the change that they want to be, that we all want to see in Estonia from the youth point of view. And I think that now, after these changes, it's the perfect time for empowering young people to tell their mind and to get the positive participation experience, which leads to a broader civic engagement and more involvement of youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Again, I guess that the role of civic education and of youth also having other possibilities than voting is really vital to this whole question and debate. But of course, having voting rights now gives the possibility perhaps to introduce more and new ways of thinking of the issue. The last but not least, we will have Rein Olesk talking about young people's perception about lowering the voting age, and after that we will have open the floor for questions and comments and discussion. Please, I guess you had some slides.
Hello, my name is Rein, this is Ellen, and we are students in Johan Skytte Institute of Political Studies, University of Tartu. And we're really honored to be here and present our survey, so thank you for inviting us. And what did we do? We conducted a qualitative survey, generally on Estonian youth and politics in general, and Estonian youth and political awareness. And how did we do it? We carried out 2 different focus group interviews. I did one in Rakvere Secondary School, and Ellen did one in Tallinn French School. I had 8 students, and Ellen had 7 students. And our survey is based on the results of these interviews.
So, first, we asked students what do they generally associate with politics, and we found that the results were largely very negative. It was a lot of cheating politicians, it was corruption, it was anger, it was disappointment. People felt there was a lack of transparency. So, but they did mention some quite neutral terms, such as elections, the government, Riigikogu, parliament. But yes, there were no positive connotations with politics at all.
And when asking what are the most interesting topics in politics for students, they answered education, some different social movements, and some even mentioned foreign affairs and international conflicts. At the time when I was conducting this interview, it was very timely in Estonia, called sugar tax. So the government planned to add some taxes to products that had too much sugar in those. So students mentioned that, and they didn't necessarily agree with this tax, and they found it a bit confusing. But mostly, what it seems to me that matter to students are the political decisions that have like direct impact on students' lives. For example, in Rakvere, there was and still is an issue where they're planning to establish a state-owned school in Rakvere. So the local government wants to build a new house for the new school, yet the current Rakvere Secondary School students are against building the new house. They think that this state-owned school should be established in the current secondary school building. So they actually protested against the new building, which you can see in the next picture. So they formed a human chain around the current school and had like different posters to give out this idea that they don't want a new building in the city. Because if they would build a new building, then this school would be turned into just primary school, and they don't think that it's a good idea.
And we asked the students to define what they understand by being politically aware and what does it mean to them. And most of them define this as simply being aware of daily news, keeping up with the news, knowing who is the prime minister, who are the ministers of education, foreign affairs and such. And we conducted our focus group interviews in spring 2017, and this was when the debate about fake news and being critical of media was a bit more relevant than it is today. So that was one of their main points, that being politically aware to them is more about being critical of the political news they consume rather than being aware of the facts. And they personally didn't really feel that they had enough political awareness to take part in national politics.
I also asked in my interview what are students' thoughts about political ideologies. Do they know anything about these, and do they think that they will base their voting decision on political ideologies? Students mentioned liberalism, conservatism, and left-right scale. Yet students mentioned that they don't find it essential to know those ideologies, since they think that people their age don't have like fully developed ideologies for themselves also. They think it's like more of a mixed version. And what also was interesting here, that student mentioned that they don't like this idea where politicians hand out different gifts and like party merch. They said that this will have like opposite effect for students. They feel as if politicians try to buy their votes by giving them gifts. So yeah, that was interesting for me. But yeah, students estimated their knowledge about political ideologies insufficient, yet they said that they don't see it problematic.
And compared to their home life or the national news, students actually felt that for them, school is one of the most objective sources of information for them. And at the same time, they also felt that in developing political awareness, school for them hasn't been very useful. We are speaking about students who are in year 11 and year 12, so this is the last years of secondary higher education in Estonia. And in the Estonian national curriculum, there is a subject as ühiskonnaõpetus, which in English is
Social studies.
Yeah, it's social studies or government. And they said that while they know that what are the functions of the government, how the elections work, what is democracy, they felt that the school didn't really impart on them the philosophical underpinnings behind these institutions. And at the same time, they also thought that something very hard to actually teach in a formal environment. Sorry. And the Tallinn French school is actually a special case because they have these tests every semester outside of the national curriculum, and several students actually thought that they learned more about Estonian politics studying for these tests than from the national curriculum.
And we talked more generally about different sources of information also, and the first not surprising answer was that the main source of information for students is social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. This is where the young people get most of their information. They also mentioned some national newspapers, for example, Postimees in Estonia, and they said that they read the newspapers digitally also, but many students still have like monthly orders at home. And when I asked whether they stop at articles that are related to politics, then they said no, not usually. They also talked about discussing political topics at home, and most of the students said that it is rather difficult to have those discussions at home because they feel like there is a huge generation gap and they understand politics so differently. They said that especially it is difficult to talk with their grandparents because according to students, their grandparents are raised up in like brainwash Soviet time, so they feel that their grandparents still have like major impact from this area. And yes, they also mentioned that it is important to stay critical about sources. Some students even said that they think that there is always a threat that in popular newspapers they might be controlled or being under like some higher authorities which control what is written there. Yes.
And we, we also asked the students, very sorry, we also asked the students' general opinion about lowering the voting age to 16. This was before the local municipal elections, and very large majority of them said that yes, they completely agree with lowering the voting age to 16, and they thought this was something very important to them. And we also asked them to predict the probable voting activity among 16, 17-year-olds. Most of them said that at least 50% of them will probably vote, and some even said 60%, and this surprisingly actually fell in line with the actual results, which was 59%.
And to end this presentation, I would say that despite of those negative connotations such corruption, etc., it seemed to me that students are interested in politics. At first I found it funny that they're waiting for schools to have like bigger role in growing the political awareness or knowledge, yet they are not willing to read voluntarily political articles. But I gave some second thought into it, and I thought that in political articles it is they are often hard to read because you have to have some previous knowledge. But if schools would give more to have that knowledge among students, then it would be also easier to read those articles to have some previous knowledge. Yes, it was interesting also that they predicted turnout pretty well. They predicted the turnout would be 50 to 60%, and the actual percent was 59%. And I guess it shows that we can't say that students are not interested in politics. And what I would also like to say, something that Lauri also mentioned, that politics is basically life. And to me it seems also that students, even if they say that they are not interested in politics, they maybe not always understand that how wide-ranged like phenomena is politics. And there are some issues that matter to students, but they don't really understand that these are very tightly connected to political decisions. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always important to hear also what young people think about these issues, and I think we got a quite good picture here. Now we will open the floor for questions and comments. I guess we have somebody with a microphone here, so please feel free to ask just by raising your hand so that we can bring the microphone. Do we have any? We have one here in front to begin with. Eturivis.
Hello, Karl Sander from Pro Patria Youth. So I have a question with the last point, actually. I mean, in 2016 there was international civic and citizenship education study, which showed that only a third of teenagers look for or read local or international newspapers, and also it showed that the internet and social media haven't fulfilled the void that was prognosed to get information about politics. So saying that young people are interested in politics might be a bit of an exaggeration. So do we need to bring those people who are not interested in politics into the voting sphere? That's my question.
Who would like to start?
As I mentioned in Rakvere, there were students who made a human chain around the school to protest against the new building. Yes, I agree that they are not interested in every part of politics, but there are definitely, especially at local levels, issues that matter to them, like youth organizations and like places where they could chill or whatever. And I do think that those places are connected to political decisions so that they can have support from local governments, etc. So I agree that they're not interested in everything, and yes, Facebook has its algorithms which doesn't usually show political things, but I believe that there is so much more to politics, and there are some decisions that is connected tightly to politics. I don't know if I answered your question.
Just to follow up, so you're saying that basically your point is that at local level 16 plus is okay, but when we talk about wider political topics, so nationwide voting 16 plus, that's a no, because they're not interested?
I haven't given like a deep thought into it, so I don't think I have the right answer now. So I do believe that it's a great decision in local level, but we should put more consideration into it to talk about in nation level.
Okay, Lauri wanted to say.
Yes, thanks. I think it's a question of how we serve it to our youngsters, because as I mentioned in my speech, we knew pretty well what we wanted from our hometown and what kind of activities we wanted, what kind of attractions we wanted to have there. So if we explain it like that in our schools easily and then from the real life, with real life examples, I think they can adapt. Of course, if you say that it's a big political thing and ideological thing or whatever, they will not catch the thing. But if we give real life examples, I think it's pretty easy to explain to them. And then for me, it was pretty easy to look, and that's always been actually, to look the programs, what people promise, what are the things I would like to have in my hometown, and what kind of people they are. Do I know them? Can I get their number? Can I call them? Because lots of, from the survey also it came out that, was it like 88% of the young voters told that they are interested what's going to be next, what their candidate is going to do, and how will they keep their promises and so on. So my recommendation for younger generation has always been that if you won't get the number of, I don't know, Siim Kallas, then don't vote for him. If you can get his number and he promised to call him every day, okay, get his number and ask, well, you promised this, what did you do and how can you help me? So on local level, it's very easy for me. And I kept my promise always that I gave my number, email address. If somebody called me, we met, we talked, and I was explaining why I was doing this or why I wasn't doing that. So I think it's a question of how do we explain it, and the big role also is in schools. In my home school, we had lots of actually political debates taking place before elections. Our teacher invited different political parties into school. We had big debates, and then we had pretty good picture to decide what do they promise and what kind of people they were and so on. So it's not so tough actually. It's if you like present it clearly and easily from the real life.
And then I know.
I have a couple of thoughts on the issue whether young people are interested or not interested in politics. I would like to cool down a little bit the hopes that everyone will be interested in politics. And this mysterious 25% who say that they are not interested in politics, I would say this is very good figure actually, because if if we take the entire population, then about 1/3 is not interested in politics, sometimes even 40%. So I even say we have to accept that some people are not interested in politics. And if we are going to push everyone and create like an obligatory standard that you have to be interested in politics, this reminds me of totalitarian society, I'm sorry. So let them be. If some people are not interested in politics, of course there is some, how to say, normal distribution. So the society where majority is not interested in politics or dissatisfied with the politics, this is not normal. But if you have like 1/5 who say that I am not interested in politics, maybe they are interested in culture or volunteering or environment or something like that. And the second point is what was spoken by, I think, almost everyone in our panel, is how you phrase the politics. I agree that basically politics is the life. So there is quite a few things which can be left out of politics. So from the researcher's point of view, it depends a lot how you put the question in the survey instrument. And typically, if you are asking very straightforward, like, are you interested in politics, taking what the connotation of politics and politician is, you are not popular, not positive figures, we know. So if you put it in that way, you got higher percentage who are saying, I am not interested. But if you are asking whether you care in which building your school will be, then almost everyone says, yes, I do care. And this figure that 88% of respondents say that we want to know what the elected representatives at local councils are going to do during 4 next years. It is very important and very positive message. And at the same time, it is also I would say, the main task for Estonia to address and accomplish. Because if local councillors know, and also the media personnel will keep the track and show what local councils are really doing, then we maybe manage to keep young voters active also in next time. But if it is like now, we do know very little what is going on in city council or rural councils. Typically, if there is some sort of scandal, corruption or something internal business, but very, very few information about really local policies, what people are interested in. So I don't know how many media people are here. Maybe someone is watching online. Should I wave this way? I think there is a camera. Please bring the inside stories from local councils to the media. One way is to meet personally, and that's a good way to do. But to understand the local politics, I think young people need to see the council as a collective body, not just one representative. You will probably tell all these positive things about what you are doing. So, of course. So we need to show also council as an entire body who is making decisions, voting something down, voting something for, agreeing, disagreeing, stopping, pushing forward, etc.
Thank you, Hanno. Then Roger.
When it comes to the national level or the regional elections, then we have to think about how we, and by we mean we as the National Youth Council or different youth organizations and especially different political parties, how we made the steps ourselves in order for the young people be wanting to participate on the national level, because the local level is something that you feel or see every day. You live there, you know more what's happening in there, and when you have the opinion or the possibility to decide on who to elect, then you can make the decision more or less in a quicker way, because the information is more at hand. And especially if you are a young person who doesn't read news every day, or doesn't look at the different national media outputs, then on the national level we have Riigikogu elections coming up next year, and I truly hope that we will see more promises made directly towards young people. I know there have been made, but have we made different advertisement, I don't know, on the radio or on TV or posters on the streets that call out young people that we want you to participate more. We want to not only make skate parks for you, but we want actually to know your opinion on the I don't know, the public transportation or the lampposts or whatever the different topics are that usually young people aren't around. So in my opinion, the bigger question is, have we made the steps ourselves from the national level?
Thank you very much for interesting topics you raised. One issue that we in Finland has discussed quite a lot before and after preparing our new school curricula has been the issue that civic education has quite often been in schools more or less technical things, that we have 200 members of parliament and the parliament is making decisions on this and that, and that's not always very interesting, or it doesn't open up to young people very easily. So I think what you said, that it's vital and important to see that democracy and politics actually means deciding on or discussing common things that belongs or is for all of us, and democracy is for all of us. So it's important to also bring in this element into schools. And for example, the political parties and NGOs and other, I guess that nowadays the recommendations are that you can invite them, you should invite them, but they should be equally represented, so that you don't present only one party or one issue. But if you don't know what the parties stand for or what the actual political agenda is, then it's of course very, maybe the politics feels very distant to you. And secondly, I think it was a very important point. I know the skate park example is a very good one. It has been brought up by two of you today, but sometimes I myself a little bit annoyed about an issue if we think about youth participation, that it's only about skate parks, or migrant participation, it's only about integration issue, because these are people who are interested, like Roger said, in a wide range of issues, and we should think about how to make it possible to participate in all of these issues. So I think you all have had a very good points on these topics. Do we have some more questions? We have it back there.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Estonia on the 100-year anniversary. You as a country, any deserves it in terms of building a good society. Being one of the most progressive parts during Soviet Union time, and now one of the most progressive parts of European Union. In terms of raising the bar, you know, in Finland we've been quite a long time proud of giving women the voting right at the beginning of last century. But this is something our forefathers and mothers from before have done. Now it's a question, what can we do at this point in time to make a positive impact? And one key issue is, of course, the youth and bringing them into the picture. And as a sort of a trailblazer or a leading country in Europe, so far Austria has been in having 16-year-old voting age for all elections. And I think Estonia, if any, has the possibility to be an innovator, contributor to the world in terms of building a good society. My question is about the future, and how do you see...
for the panelists to ask in particular about now the national elections. Are you for lowering the voting age for 6 to 16 also in the national elections? And maybe short argumentation for it.
Okay, should we start from here, or who wants to pick up? Okay, please.
I can answer because I mentioned it also in my short introductory speech. Of course, I'm positive about that, and I think it should be next logical step. But I think we should give some time for settling the local elections, and we should saw the next results, and perhaps after that the next results from the local elections, and then I think it's a logical step that we move to the state level. But once again, it's very important that we then we will focus more in our schools onto this topic and on the theoretical level, and explaining and teaching to our children what it is about, what's about politics. As we saw from the survey just presented to you, that our school children right now, they are not interested in political ideologies on the left or right wing. I think it was interesting for me to see that they mentioned liberals and conservatives, but not social democrats or something like that. So only the right wing. But this is the thing that should be done if we want to move on to the state level. Definitely, because those questions are related more to the ideology, and if, for example, if you talk about tax reforms and so on. So yes, for the conclusion, I would say I think it should be next logical step. It takes some time. We should leave some time to settle the results of the local elections, and then move on. And of course, it's again very important to try to explain to young people, not so much with facts, as you mentioned also, that if you explain that in Estonian Parliament we have 101 members and so on, those dry facts, it's not so interesting for young people. But if you give real life examples, and if you draw parallels that, for example, I don't know what that means if you have a proportional tax system or progressive tax system and so on. So it's very important if you give real life examples for younger people. And I think it's not very tough to do, but you have to think it through. So far, in my opinion, it hasn't done so well, because if I was in high school, I don't even remember if we were talking about that so thoroughly, and I definitely didn't understand that way, but I definitely understood what kind of school I want to like to go, and what kind of attractions I want to like to have, and so on. So if we try to take some more real life examples, it's going to be easier. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you have any project?
I bet the ministry part in Estonia who are sitting here right now are listening very carefully what I'm about to say from the Estonian National Youth Council side. Unfortunately, I can't give you a strict statement from the Estonian National Youth Council about lowering the voting age on the national or the Europarlament elections. But I can say that we have spoke about it in our team in the Estonian National Youth Council, and we all think that it's something that we need to talk about in the next few years, definitely after the next elections of Riigikogu next year. But to keep my personal point of view, then as I said in my keynote speech, then definitely it's something we have to talk about broadly in our society in the next few years. I hope that the process, given that we still have the national level and the Europarlament elections, that lowering of those voting ages should be done together, in my opinion, and I hope that it doesn't take another 10 years. I hope that our society is mature enough to process this idea a little quicker than 10 years, but it's not that time to assume anything yet, and I hope that we can start the discussion with the political parties and the youth organizations at least by the end of next year.
Do you know?
I am certainly for to go to the next level, and I would not wait just go on. Of course, the next elections, spring 2019, will be as it is quite clear. And also the legal process of constitutional change is quite lengthy. So if interested parties start the process after, let's say, in fall 2019, I think that's already a good time to start. But there are a couple of issues to consider. The first issue is voting rights of non-citizens, or let's say Russian-speaking minority. But I would say, luckily, this problem will be largely solved by time itself. Because if you look at citizenship statistics, then we see that how to put it shortly and clearly, there is huge disparities in terms of Estonian citizenship in younger cohorts and older cohorts. So I assume that in time when we have a voting age 60 at all elections, all people in the voting age will be Estonian citizens. So the portion of non-citizens will be very, very marginal. And just for our foreign guests who are maybe not so aware, Estonia had huge problem with non-citizens and citizens of third countries. But this is continuously solving by itself. The second point, which is by far more difficult and more sensitive, is the balance between active and passive voting rights. Active means that you can vote, and passive means that you can stand as a candidate. This was slightly discussed also during this constitutional change. Some people proposed the more radical variant to allow also to decrease the passive voting right. So if we now lower the voting right for parliamentary elections, I think this topic came up more sharply. So we need to think what to do with this. Currently, the right to be MP at Riigikogu is 21. So should we lower it also, like to the 18? I think this is something which needs to be really roughly studied, and I even don't know at the moment what is the international practice in these terms. And my last short note is about civic education. I have been involved in this area since early 90s, and I have been part of the large team who made the curriculum. I am the author of several textbooks, so part of your criticism is directly to me, and I in some points agree with this criticism. But looking at more generally, what is lacking in Estonian schools in terms of social education is economic education. It doesn't make too big difference if we teach more on politics. To understand what the policy is and what the politics is, you need to understand the tax system, for example, or the example what Lauri gave. And in these terms, our young people are just like, how it is, tabula rasa. The first year fresh students came to the university. I am asking, do you know how much your family is paying taxes? How much is the portion of household expenditure, like communal expenditure, heating and electricity, etc.? Most of them don't know. They have any idea. So the education is much broader issue as just what we write down in the national curricula. This is also part of, so to say, parenting education. If parents pay the bills and young people do not know how it was possible to go to the Canarian Islands in 1 year and why it was not possible to go in another year. So this is also the situation that politics is the same as life. So we need really to enlarge the economic education. And this is again stuck in teacher competencies and also the division of subjects. Since Soviet times, we have very heavy subjects in history. This is my personal view, but I really think that we need to reduce the number of hours which is devoted to the history and increase the number which is related to the economy and if you want, business or something.
Thank you, Anu, for your answer. I wasn't actually, I must say, I wasn't actually aware of that you have to be 21 to be elected to the Riigikogu. In Finland, we usually have had the principle that voting rights and right for candidacy, they are at the same level and follow each other, and that's why some of the criticism towards lowering the voting rights beneath 18 years, then that you would have to separate it. So that's quite an interesting thing. Then if there is time, you can perhaps elaborate on it later on. I would be interested to hearing you mentioned voting rights for non-citizens, because we have fairly extensive voting rights for non-citizens in Finland, but I don't actually know at the local level, but I don't actually know how it works in Finland. But before that, I give Roger had a comment, and I give the possibility for also, sorry, for Rain to answer this question, if you have something.
Thank you. One quick topic on the same curriculum topic is that we not only the economical and the political level is important when we talk about what we need to improve on the curriculum side, but one topic that we don't discuss that much yet, but we should, is how can we intertwine non-formal and formal education together. I mean, how can we make a system in our education that the different activities that you do beside your going to school and the non-formal part where you can learn different topics, for example, in the youth organizations, being a part of them, how can we make the system better in a way where the out-of-school activities are shown in a more positive light than the formal school system.
Thank you. Do you have, Rain, something to add?
I would just say that I rather agree with those points that it is a great idea that young people should be presented in our parliament, but I do believe also that we have to take some steps in our education system and curriculums to make that change.
Okay, thank you. Then we had a question back there.
Thank you. My name is Gurman. I'm from Jeff, Finland, and I wanted to ask, like Professor Toots mentioned about media, and then at the start they mentioned Brexit, and we all know that fake news propaganda things happened, and also in U.S. elections. I'm more like it's a concern than a question. That do you see that it would activate the fake news propaganda people and troll machines in the elections when we lower the voting rate age, and how would you tackle it? Like there could be also influence from other countries. There could be influence from like companies by spreading the fake news. And how would you what are your opinions on that? That would it be like a bigger threat to the youth, young voters, and how would you tackle it? Thank you.
Okay, round about fake news. If we start with Anu.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know where to start. Basically, I disagree with your opinion that lowering of voting age will increase submission of fake news. And there are several reasons to be sure or to argue for this point. First, the IEA ICCS study, which was referred here several times, and which has very large samples in about 30 countries, shows that actually young people are not so dependent on social media if we speak about political news in social media. They are chatting a lot, but this is about just young people's lives, not that much about politics. So this is the first point. And the second point, again, to tackle or to address the fake news thing, you really need to educate people. Because if you are stupid, let's put it in plain language, if you are stupid, you don't understand what is what. And Estonia had, I don't know whether this program is continuing or not, but we had some time ago cooperation between schools and Estonian Newspaper Association, and the program was called Newspapers in the Classroom. That was the time when we didn't have any Twitter or things like that. We had papers, really newspapers. And then journalists came to schools and also made teacher training to educate teachers to see behind the lines, so to say, to understand what is the position of author and whether this is neutral information or it is a propaganda or it is a fake news. So here we really need to teach teachers first and then to teach also students.
To clarify, it's not my opinion that it will affect. I just wanted to know that. Do you think it?
Oh, yeah, I don't think.
Okay. Lauri.
Yeah, I agree with Professor Tots, and I would say that it's very important to keep your emotions apart from your reality. And if you make decisions also, don't take it emotionally. Don't try to take it. I know it's very easy to take it emotionally, but you have to keep those two things apart, because it's nowadays it's very, very important. As you know, in United States, actually, last elections were won through social media. Actually, Donald Trump was doing it pretty well. So and it can be done how to say, unconsciously. You don't even understand that. So it kind of just works on you. So in my opinion, it's on local elections, on local level, it's not so problematic, because again, I would say that look for the person, look what he or she has done, ask questions, ask her or his number, and follow him, so or her what she does. And if she doesn't keep her promises, then you call her and then say what's going on. On the state level, it's a little bit tougher, but I completely agree that it should be taught in schools also, and yes, that's about it. So to kind of teach to our youngsters that you have to always ask, what is the result of that? For example, if they say you in social media that Brexit is a good thing, we are independent and we have our own rights and we have then power and whatever, we are then free, then ask what are the results, what are the economical results, what are the social results, and so on. So everything is actually in life connected. So if we explain to our youth that you have to ask additional questions, what are the results, and if you get the results that actually are okay for you, then vote for that Brexit or whatever it is for Donald Trump. But if the results actually are not rational and are not given to you, then you have to ask another question and then decide. So you always have to be rational, keep your emotions apart from that, and of course ask lots of questions and from the real life. Take it from the real life, not some kind of theoretical things.
Okay, Rain or Roger, do you have a very short answer, because we are now reaching our time limit?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be short. A recent survey showed that although Estonian-speaking and Russian-speaking youngsters have different approaches when it comes to decision-making processes, some more radical, some not so radical, then overall the youngsters in Estonia, luckily or no, aren't that radical in different processes. And overall, we don't. I don't think it's a possibility that from the young people, our uprising of fake news should come. And the second part is that luckily we do have electoral guards and young electoral guards who keep a keen eye on the election processes. And if something really bad or really fake news worthy or comes up, then definitely people will know on the national level.
Okay, Thank you very much. We have had a very interesting discussion on how youth have perceived voting, and that perhaps e-voting and e-engagement is not yet there among the youngest ones, but that young people still participate and are active, and especially the role of schools and also NGOs, but we need to think about, and then also the role of media is important, the role of training, teachers training and so forth. So we see, and the role of other participatory rights. So we see that it's quite a complex issue with the whole package. But I would like to thank you very much and give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
And to thank you from the National Youth Council, some small presents also for the panelists. The next part of the seminar, the discussion about what were the learning outcomes from the first Estonian experience. And I would like to ask Neelis Nemsist-Veridze and Ivo Visak to come to the discussion.